On to the Big Ten. Let's go to Oregon for a minute. We all had Oregon. Actually, we all had Oregon in the same exact spot in our playoff rankings. Tom, thoughts here? Oh, we got Tom on mute.
I was hoping we didn't have any technical issues like we've had lately on my end, that is. Oregon's a really curious situation, in my opinion. Looking within the Big Ten, it is a situation where it feels like a three-team race between Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. And truthfully, it does feel like anybody's conference to win between those three. Last year, Oregon head and shoulders looked better throughout the season than everybody else in the Big Ten in their first year in the conference. Winning the Big Ten championship game against Penn State, the head scratcher was the blowout loss in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. Obviously, the Buckeyes at the time, under Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator, learned their lesson in their loss at Autzen earlier on in the season and just smoked the Ducks there in the Rose Bowl. So it leaves a lot of questions. I think the biggest thing is the roster turnover from this past season. There's still a lot of talent on this team, but when you look at what departed, especially for the NFL draft, a lot of talent in the trenches is gone. On the defensive line, Derek Harmon, Jordan Birch, Jamari Caldwell. On the offensive line, Josh Connerly Jr. and Johnny Cornelius. And not to mention Jordan James, Dylan Gabriel, the engine of the offense. Dylan Gabriel made that thing work. He was the perfect point guard quarterback for an Oregon offense. Jordan James was outstanding last year. I love his game, not to mention what Tez Johnson did in the passing game. That's something we touched on a little bit earlier on in this show, is losing his explosivity, plus Evan Stewart going down in the offseason. There's a lot of questions there. And then inside linebacker Jeffrey Bassa was really a critical part of that locker room and that culture that Dan Lanning has helped cultivate. So the coordinator situation still feels very, very strong. Will Stein, we talked about him a little bit earlier on. I completely agree with Cole. I think this is his last year at Oregon and as a coordinator, because he's going to be, once again, one of the hottest names in the cycle once the offseason comes around. I'm looking at defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi, because the gift that this Oregon defense had last year was the pass rush. Birch, Harmon, all the names I just mentioned, not to mention Uiagalelei coming back this year is a big one, but still Birch, Harmon, and Uiagalelei were very, very good against the pass. But when it came to stopping the run, Penn State exposed them in the Big Ten championship game. They were exposed at different points during the season, and the secondary looked absolutely bewildered against Ohio State. So my question is, what are they going to do to correct that this coming year? Looking at the defense, I put no stock in Bear Alexander. I don't know about you two. This guy is a professional transfer portal hopper. He's going from team to team, getting bag to bag based on old hype and potential, and he's yet to prove any of it. So I really don't even think about that in terms of his acquisition there by Oregon. But Mateo Uiagalelei, Amari Washington, Tiatum Tuioti, I think so much of in terms of what they have with a pass rush there. The secondary, you're going to have transfers there, and Dylan Thieneman and Theron Johnson. You have some younger guys in the secondary that are going to have to play meaningful snaps. Do they improve off of last season? I don't necessarily have the answers to that. And again, I'll point towards that Big Ten championship game and that loss to Ohio State. They got killed on the ground and they got killed through the air by both Penn State and Ohio State in those games that really, really mattered. Offensively, you're probably going to have 3 incoming transfers starting on your offensive line. However, Dan Lanning and Will Stein have proven that when it comes to transfers, Oregon is very, very good at turning around transfers in a short amount of time and making them productive members of the team. When it comes to quarterback, there are some people that think Dante Moore could win the Heisman this year. And I will hear that argument. And I will also hear the side that this guy has not yet played as the starter for the Oregon Ducks in a full season capacity yet. So there's all this still yet to be proven. What he did at UCLA, all well and good. I love the opportunity for him to sit behind Dylan Gabriel for a year. I know there's a lot of people who are going to be like, well, it's 3 consecutive transfer quarterbacks from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel and now to Dante Moore. But Moore is a bit of an exception considering he sat last year. I love what they have at tailback. Noah Whittington was a violent runner last year. Mekhi Hughes, we talked about him earlier on in the show. I love what his game is. But then there is the big question at wide receiver. Is it DeCorian Moore, the extremely talented freshman? After that, Gary Bryant Jr., Kyler Casper, Jeremiah McClellan, Malik Benson, Justice Lowe at least played meaningful snaps for this team last year and was productive, but not necessarily asked to do it at a high level because they had so many other talented guys ahead of him. Kenyon Sadiq
Yeah.
is very, very talented at tight end. I think this offense is going to look a little bit more old school Oregon. And when I say that, kind of think about more the Chip Kelly era, in that Dante Moore can run. He is mobile. He is a gifted passer. But you got two really good tailbacks there. Best way to take pressure off of a quarterback who's just starting within your system in his first year. Having a safety blanket at tight end makes you feel really, really good. Jamari Johnson has a lot of promise as well. They have a very good tight end room in general. But if there are questions at wide receiver, you maybe have to see how they discover that throughout the season. Their schedule is intriguing in that they start off the year, let's see, home against Montana State, then home against Oklahoma State, at Northwestern to open up Big Ten play on September 13th. They renew the Civil War on September 20th against Oregon State at home. And then we talked about it a little bit earlier. Penn State hosts Oregon, the first whiteout at night that means anything to Penn State fans since 2019. First time that a TV network has set it up against Penn State's legitimate best home opponent. I don't love that situation for any first year in a system starting quarterback when your previous competition is Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Oregon State. You then get a bye, then you play Indiana, and people might not love Indiana this year, but give them credit for making the playoff last year. You're at Rutgers, you host Wisconsin. I will say this until the day Kirk Ferentz retires. At Kinnick is dangerous. And if that's a night game, November 8th, who knows what Iowa looks like at that point in time. There's a lot of hype with Mark Gronowski, and you know that's a talented defense every single time. Think about the way that Oregon struggled on the road at Wisconsin, and Wisconsin made that a dogfight last year. Does Iowa do the same thing? You'll host Minnesota, and then you're hosting USC, and you end the year with Cole's favorite team, the Washington Huskies, and Damon Williams. Do they play spoiler potentially for anything Oregon is trying to do in the postseason? So, like so many of these teams we've talked about in the top 10, there are a lot of question marks surrounding the Oregon Ducks. I don't know what they're necessarily going to look like defensively. I hope they've resolved some of their issues in terms of stopping the run, but you're really not going to have a good handle on this team until mid-October, like a lot of these teams. But still, I think the peak and the potential with Dante Moore and the running game is great, and it's outstanding, and they will probably lean on that. But does it take them all the way to another Big Ten championship? We'll see.
My biggest gripe with Oregon fans right now, and just really the national public media, the way that we hype up Arch is kind of how I feel about Dante Moore just a little bit. Like, it's unyielding pressure because of guys before him. Like, the expectation for a lot of people when it comes to Oregon quarterbacks is, hey, you got to go not only lead your team to a conference championship appearance like Bo did and like Dylan did, but also to New York City. You got to be in the Heisman Trophy race. Is it unwarranted at this point for Dante? Because again, he made the smart move by, instead of transferring to a school where he was immediately going to start, he got to sit for a year and learn the ins and outs of Will Stein's offense. But we don't really know what he is as a player. And the little that we did see of him at UCLA, there was a lot of growing pains that you just don't know if they're going to end up growing out of him in year 3.
Yeah, at UCLA, 53.5% completion percentage, 1,600 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, got sacked 25 times, and he had a negative rushing total, no rushing touchdowns, and then played very sparingly last year in relief duty for Dylan Gabriel. So again, I think this is different than what Nix and what Gabriel experienced, because it's not a situation where they expected him to walk in and start immediately. Having that year with Will Stein, I think, is going to be very, very important for him. I really think when it comes to young quarterback, and you have Mekhi Hughes and Noah Whittington there who can take the pressure off, stick with that. Stick with that for a while. Figure out who are going to be those guys in the passing game. And if DeCorian Moore winds up being an absolute star right out of the gates, a la Jeremiah Smith, then there's your answer. You're going to feel strongly about it. But still, Dante Moore, I think people picking him for the Heisman is more faith in the brand and the offensive scheme and Will Stein than it is the player.